You know, we live in an industry where we're constantly talking about disruption, about the age of the PC, the age of the network, the age of cloud, the age of mobility, et cetera. And I'm going to talk today and try to convince you how sort of this digital era that we're talking about now is also different. I had slides. So yeah, we're going to talk about mobility in the digital first world. Hopefully have a little bit of fun as we go along. But we fundamentally, a couple things have changed. Stuff that we couldn't do a decade ago, certainly, or even 5 years ago. Stuff that took a long time to change. And stuff that is being enabled by technology that never was historically. Let me tell you what I mean. First off, we all recognize that we're immersed in technology 24/7. My measure as a speaker has to do with how often you look down in your lap. We used to call this the BlackBerry prayer. I don't know what we call it now. But you know, the average person, a professional worker, carries over 2 devices. The typical lifespan for a smartphone is about 20 months, because we're all eager to get the next thing. And we're used to working in an environment where we would churn devices every maybe 3 years or 4 years. So every 20 months, it's something new. Remember when the Motorola Razr, that cool industrial design flip phone, was the thing you had to have? Then Palm was taking over the world. BlackBerry was hot. iPhones have been hot. Samsung's great device. We are chasing fashion at this point. And as Bruce said, it's very much in the control of users. That's nothing new. We've always had technology around. What's changed is that people live in this world sometimes more often than they live in the real world. 24/7, people go they take their phones to bed with them. I'll just talk about the sleeping part. And people actually would say, there are Pew studies that said people would give that intimacy up if they kept just to keep their smartphone. This means a lot to people. And they live first in the digital world. In the retail environment, we're very familiar with the fact that we have a customer that walks into a retail store that knows all about my brand, all about my competitors, knows what the best prices are on the market. They live first in the digital world. For government, same story applies. They're already trying to figure out what is the best way to get my taxes reduced. You see communities coming together to deal with home assessment rates, et cetera. You see in the medical field people more willing to trust something like WebMD or patients like me than they will even trust their own doctor. We have become totally immersed in the digital world. It is the thing we trust so much, sometimes despite ourselves. They paid a guy to make this sign. Why? Because the GPS system hasn't really kept up with the real world. It's not dynamic enough. It's not real time enough. There's a lesson learned there. The other thing that's changed is everything can be instrumented. For a few bucks, maybe a few more, this is a track dot. I travel a lot. And I can throw this in my suitcase. And when I go to Peoria and my bag goes to Sacramento, I can tell the airline where it went. On a bill of materials basis, this cost them about $20 to make because it's an active type sensor, et cetera. But there are a lot of other really cheap sensors on the market. We're hitting key inflection points where tagging things is going to be really, really cheap, under a penny, so it's kind of recognizable. Things that are on the network and are addressable are under a dime. Things that actually report back on their own are under a few dollars. Full-up computers, like the Arduinos now, under $15. We're hitting these key inflection points where anything that can be instrumented will be instrumented. So if you think about, you know, we've got billions of devices that we all carry in our pocket. That's a really big number. Just wait what happens when the world expands. We're predicting roughly 30 billion sensor-type devices on the network That includes the internet and everything else by 2020. So now we are dwarfed by things in addition to being instrumented as people. What's really interesting about the Internet of Things is it's not really one thing, and it's also very specific to certain industries. You know, Gartner for a long time has talked about 4 disruptive forces: cloud, mobile, social, and information. Those are general purpose type technologies that apply to everybody. A lot of these things that you see on the screen here are specific to a given industry. We've also, in our modeling, kind of mapped out what industries are going to be most effective, what the economic value add will be. We estimate by 2020 the impact of all this stuff adds about 1.9 trillion in economic value add on a global basis. Lots of new markets get created, products turn into services, customer relationships work in a different way through things contextually. To make a little more sense out of the chart, what we're saying here is the size of the bubble is how many devices. The y-axis is where we see customer demand, and then kind of on the reverse dimension, there's a lot of systemic friction, meaning it's going to take a long time for things like smart pills to come to the market. Some cities are going to be very, very carefully about automating the grid, despite the great advantages there, because they're worried about what is the return, or they're worried about the risks associated with perhaps moving too early and perhaps getting attacked, et cetera. So lots of different things. The Internet of very different things, really. So mobile used to be about executives with email, right? But now we need to be thinking beyond that. It's really about people controlling the environment, interacting in the environment with whatever they find around them, controlling door locks, environmentals, providing information back to people. You know, there are so many sensors on a device. I believe there's five sensors in an iPhone 5, about 10 in the latest Samsung 5, not counting radios. These things have, you know, accelerometers, GPS. I saw a spectrometer on the market the other day. There's all kinds of very interesting sort of environmental sensors that are coming into these devices. And we think that the smartphone will be the central point of control for those 30 billion devices. Roughly 500 devices in an affluent home that might be controllable at some level. And lots of different really interesting sort of science experiments that are going on here. Okay? Because, again, as IT, if we look at it from the IT perspective, we have indeed lost control. 80% of devices sold in 2017 will be sold into the consumer market. 7 years ago, it was 50-50. 83% of those are these ultra lightweight devices, things we carry around in our pocket or have at hand all the time, often running new operating systems that weren't really built for security to begin with. Tablets as well. Tablets really left IT kind of flat-footed when you get right down to it. So that's why one of the reasons the early BYO models were actually built around tablets, because, you know, consumers do really creative things with them. You can mount them on the dashboard of your car, because nothing could go wrong with that. You can mount them. A lot of people sit in bed and read with them. It's become their reader by default. They've mounted them in their kitchen for various reasons, become part of home automation. There's no room in the house that the iPad hasn't actually penetrated. This is an actual product, right? So, I think it sends a couple messages. First, I have a technology problem. Okay. And second, it's a clear message to everyone else in your family: get your own iPad. All right? Or stock up on more wipes. Not that kind of wipes. Screen wipes. Come on, you people. So, but mobile's also about this. Anybody use Google Glass here? Do you have any? Oh, there's a few. Keep seeing them in environments. I don't see you wearing them today. Somebody told me it's the fastest way to get beat up in a bar. The number one question, I should ask you guys, but I'll just say, the number one question that people have told me who use these things, that when you're wearing them, somebody said the number one question you're asked is, are you filming me right now? Because people are worried about, what is the line socially with this? We're just not comfortable with it. But there are other applications like dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs where they add tremendous benefit. Yeah, we got to overcome some things like battery life and usability, so forth, but there are a lot of jobs that you need to keep your hands free. And could be in manufacturing, could be in first responders, like this device from GoldenEye. We think there's there's likely to be a lot of interest. We know in our own client base there's a lot of interest in industrial wearables or wearables kind of in the workplace. That's mobile too. We may just, at some point, just be carrying around our identities in our pockets or whatever, and just find whatever screen we can talk to, use gesture interfaces, et cetera. A lot of this stuff is becoming more and more sort of out of movies and science fiction and so forth and into the real world. So what does this really mean then for your customers, first and foremost, for the workplace, for employees, how you engage employees, and how you deal with other people that might be kind of in between, subcontractors, part-time workers, seasonal workers, doctors, etc. What does it mean for them? So let's start from the end customer. I travel a lot, and GPS is a great thing for me because I can be on a rental car, I can get around anywhere, if I've got 30 extra minutes, I'll just go off because I know I can find my way back to the airport. I don't get on one of these because I feel if I do, I'm going to probably end up who knows where, right? Or worse, because I don't understand the transportation system. It's not built in. So New York City recognizes this, and New York City has opened up APIs to third-party developers as a way to present applications to the public that tell them where the bus is, what the best route is. Maybe I want to avoid certain neighborhoods, et cetera. Gives me all kinds of information. Key point is, New York City is not swimming in cash for this type of stuff. So what they've done is they've engaged, in essence, the citizen developer community and allowed them to build mobile applications. And you find a wide variety of mobile applications in the commercial app stores. City of Boston and Philadelphia have also recognized that we have sensors in these devices. So in essence, I can instrument my car. What do I mean? You run over a pothole, rather than pulling over to the side and calling them or texting them or whatever, with the Street Bump app from Boston and Philadelphia, it automatically recognizes that we've got some irregularity in the road, and that's reported back directly in real time. They get enough of that data, they know that they have to go out and respond. Interesting side effect, just as kind of a sidebar on that, it also means that the way I count city services has to change because I've got a lot more incidents being reported. How does that change my metrics? So there's always secondary effects of automation like this. So this is the Street Bump application. Interesting thing, Center of Urban Mechanics, joint venture of Philadelphia and Boston, two cities that also don't have a lot of cash to throw around, but they set up a totally separate group to deal with digital disruptions, and we think that's often going to be the model. It's not trying to work this necessarily directly within IT, but to do the innovation and the disruption by a new digital group. You see titles now like Chief Digital Officer as an example, and you see organizations like the Center for Urban Mechanics coming together to create kind of community capabilities. I mentioned the flaws in GPS. Anybody use Waze here? Why do you use Waze? I'm sorry? It's much more accurate because it is real time. It uses those sensors built into your phone, reports back into the cloud. Here's the combination of mobility meets cloud, meets big data, and there's a social element as well to it. So people can report, hey, there's a speed trap over here, et cetera. Dog by the side of the road, whatever it might be. So this Waze, now part of Google, is an excellent example of marrying the capabilities of mobile into the capabilities in the cloud. We believe that a strong mobile strategy is supported by a strong cloud strategy, whether it's public cloud, private cloud, community cloud, whatever it might be. The way to scale things up and keep it secure is going to be working through cloud capabilities. Did not say every cloud was secure. Retailers recognize first and foremost that you're going to engage digitally, and they're embracing it, like Armani does or Burberry does, as an example. And when you get into the store, you may be, your smartphone may be continually having a dialogue with a sensor, a Bluetooth sensor, a iBeacon or Bluetooth LE type device that costs, $15, $20 in volume, and gives the retailer some idea of where you are. Maybe it would be used to actually track your foot patterns. Maybe it would be used to send you promotions, or you just bought some green socks. You'd really need a green belt to go with that sort of thing. So the idea of digital selling and kind of living in the digital world, even when you're in physical space, is really interesting. I would really take a look at, if you're involved with retail or just about any industry, I would take a look at the whole idea of indoor geolocation, geofencing. Air Patrol, for example, is an interesting vendor that's out here. Not an endorsement, just interesting sets of products. We think that indoor proximity is going to be really, really interesting. You could have things like, if you're outside of retail, you could have your applications work on the tarmac of a runway, for example, but not work when you leave that perimeter. Lots of really interesting breakthroughs, again, marrying cloud and geo capabilities into mobility. Mobility is also personal. This is MD Anderson, the cancer center in Houston, one of the largest, most innovative cancer centers around. They recognize that at the time you're diagnosed and you go into the center, you're in a very stressful environment. Not only you, but your family. And so what they do is they produce an entire set of materials, videos to get you comfortable with the facility. You can talk to clinicians. You can talk to something like a concierge if you are if you're a family member and you just want to know, where to eat, you want somebody to talk to, et cetera. So people are recognizing the power of embracing digital to embrace people. So for the customer and constituency side, oftentimes the scale is different, the tools are different, the stakeholders are different, et cetera. So we see, as part of a mobile center of excellence, focusing specifically on constituencies and communities, your end customers, as a discipline. Then leveraging the capabilities of cloud and mobile, social engagement, et cetera. Very often, developers especially tend to lack the skills. We heard a bit about that this morning, that finding skills for developers are very difficult. Over 70% of the big B2C apps that you see were actually sourced in the app stores, were actually sourced by third-party boutiques. And here I'm thinking about big, the big brands and so forth. So they've gone outside. We still believe that's a best practice. Look outside for design capabilities, et cetera. But ultimately, we think people are going to want to move these capabilities in-house, that mobile is the new platform for the future. And you do find a couple of examples of where the mobile development team is now as large as the traditional development teams. We saw one title this morning, Steve's title of Director of Mobility. We're going to see more titles like that. So if you're in the space, you're in a good space for your career.